Bet. All right. Welcome everyone to Ignite Power Session 11, closing the deal. So last time, we talked about how to negotiate the deal, how to get yourself under contract. And I know I took it a little bit further into negotiations as far as inspections and appraisals. We'll hit again on that a little bit in here. So again, stop me if I'm glossing over in this video as far as the negotiations around something goes. Just stop me and I'll definitely reiterate what we talked about in the last session. But for the most part, what we're going to be doing today is I look at today's class is all about talking about how to win in real estate, how to take your contract from contract to close, how to set up your systems, your processes, your checklists, as well as how do you get some leads from leads? So I'm a big proponent of getting leads from the leads that I'm working with. And here's why, and here's how it works so well. So if you've taken my classes before, you guys know I love the analogy with the car. So I'm going to pick on Ann. Ann, I'm sorry, you're going to get picked on today a little bit. Just because you're new, I love your smile, your red glasses. Ann, what kind of car do you drive?
I have a Ford Expedition.
How long have you had that big boy?
A little over 2 years.
A little over 2 years. Now, Ann, when you saw that vehicle, or when you first bought that vehicle up till today, do you notice that there's more Ford Expeditions on the street today than there were before you bought that thing?
Well, I had for the last 10 years, I've had a Ford Expedition, so it didn't really make a difference but you're right. When I first got one, I did see more on the road.
And I'm sure that's been like that, pretty much throughout your driving experience from all the cars you've had. Every time I've gotten a new car, I start to see that car on the road more often, right? And what that is it's actually raising our reticular activating system in the back of our head. It's called our RAS. It's right underneath the medulla oblongata. That thing creates a heightened sense of awareness for us in things that we do in life. And when somebody's going through the real estate process or realm of the transaction, that thing is in the back of their mind and in the back of their skull. It raises up. And so they have a heightened sense of awareness to pick up on real estate around their surroundings. So throughout the transaction, when you see your buyer or your seller get excited about the next piece of the puzzle being complete. So for instance, both buyers and sellers usually take a sigh of relief and a breath when they go through inspection, because inspection is a big component. And that excitement is a great time to ask them for different leads. And the way that I do it is I simply bring up exactly what I just asked Ann about. I'll say, hey guys, now that we're through inspection, congratulations. We're almost to the finish line. But you know what that means, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer? It means that you and I aren't going to be conversing and talking as much as we have been over the last couple of weeks or months. I saw you driving that Ford Expedition around to all of our showings. When you first purchased that Ford Expedition, did you happen to notice more on the road? They'll say yes. And that's when you say, well, you see, real estate's no different. Since you're under contract, I'm sure that, when you're out and about going to restaurants or church or work, you're probably going to interact with people that also are talking about real estate. Would you do me a favor? If you run into anyone who's thinking of or talking about real estate and has any questions, would you do me a favor and introduce me to them or connect me with them? So that way I might be able to help them too. You see, the fact of the matter is we're not going to be working together as much. And, I need to fulfill my time. So if you could do me that favor, just kind of keep your eyes and ears peeled for anybody that might be looking for some real estate help. I'm your man and I'm here to help. Just asking that simple question increases their sense of awareness as well. They start to see that expedition on the road. They start to hear people in restaurants talk about buying a home, or the server who just, moved in with her boyfriend and they're saving up for a new house or something like that. That is where you will get leads off of leads. And I found that it's most effective, one, when you ask that maybe right after they go under contract, through inspection, through appraisal, and then possibly at your walkthrough the day before closing. Pretty exciting time too. So those are some different times and different things that I will say throughout going under contract to grab leads. Okay. But for the purposes of, this Ignite class, we're going to talk about something like that. We're going to talk about processes, right? As well as checklists and what to do. So if you guys, there's my mouse, here we go. If you guys can understand how the process works here, I like to use a flow chart. So for those of you that are visual with a flow chart, that's what we're going to probably talk on through this series. If you've got your Ignite material, here's kind of the definitions of what we're going to talk about in the flow chart. But the only way to create a system and a process in my eyes, is to understand what's going on and what's happening. So last week we talked about getting your offer accepted, right? Three different ways that you can do that: rejection, acceptance, and a counter proposal. So we're under contract now. Let's make sure we work on both sides. Let's pretend first we're on the buying side of this thing. All right. We're on the buying side. The very first thing that you're going to do is you're going to send your executed documents or your contracts, your counter proposal and the contract. You're going to send that to the lender, as well as you may still need to send that to the listing side. So if you're on the buyer side and the listing side sends you a counter proposal, you're definitely going to want to make sure that when you execute the counter proposal, you send that back to the selling side. So that way they have executed docs too. Especially with your first transaction and just getting started, those first couple of deals are so exciting that you kind of sometimes will forget that the other side doesn't even have that executed piece. And I hate to say it, but there's a lot of bad agents out there that will basically take and never even call you and just expect that you're kind of rejecting their counter proposal, and they may move on with another offer. So once you execute, make sure all parties that are involved have that. On the buying side, you just need to work on the lender and the listing side. On the listing side, they're going to send all of those docs to the title company. So you won't have to worry about it on the buy side. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to start to work on, for myself, I send my buyer an email. I love written communication once I go under contract. And in my email, I lay out the first kind of 3 major steps. Number 1 is who, where, and what, and to send the earnest money check to or deliver to. The secondary piece of that email is going to be who my inspectors are and when to get the inspection scheduled and complete. So this is really important. Make sure that when you send this email or this communication off to your buyer, they don't just know the inspection objection deadline date, because they may wait a few days before they actually schedule the inspection. And what they really need to do is skip the schedule of the inspection day 1, because you never know how far out your inspectors actually are. So if you wait too long, you may not be able to get on your inspector's schedule, which means you may now need to start to negotiate moving out those inspection deadlines. Number 3, you want to always have a list of vendors. You always want to have a list of insurance people. So your insurance companies, your insurance vendors, send your clients a list of that. And normally what I will do is I will say something along the lines of, if you're already insured with your vehicle through a different company, feel free to get a quote from them too, because most of the time, home and auto bundles are the cheapest way to go. So from the buyer standpoint, that's what you're going to do day 1. First and foremost, I know Melissa's on here. Well, Melissa and Melissa, these 2 ladies, congratulations, shout out to them. Both of them just went under contract on their first buyer yesterday and today, really, or yesterday. Congratulations. So that's going to be the first thing that they're going to do. After that, you're kind of more in a limbo state. You're more in a what I would call reactionary state. So earnest money is delivered, inspection is scheduled, everybody has all of the written agreements, and the insurance companies are starting to work on quotes. That's the proactive side of what the buyer side needs to do. Now the reactive side comes into play. When I say reactive side, I mean, that the sellers are going to be working on their initial checklist. So let's switch gears a second. Let's look at a seller side. So if you're on a seller side and you go under contract, the very first thing that you're going to do is, one, make sure you have all of the executed documents, and you're going to want to make sure that the buyer side has all of their executed documents as far as the contract goes. Then the secondary piece that you're going to do is you're going to send those documents to the title company, to the closer. So if you have a listing coming up and you've never done a listing before you have all of that, before you go under contract, it's best to start to look for a title company and a title rep to point you to a closer. So a title company works a lot like a real estate office, right? At a real estate office, you have the real estate agents, and then you have leadership. Leadership isn't the one who actually does the real estate transactions. And so that's why you need a real estate agent. Same thing with a title company. A title company will have their leadership or their marketing director or the salesperson that goes out and meets everyone. That's not the person that you actually work with. So Melissa, I'm going to be picking on you a lot today, Melissa Brashers. You've met Kyle Snyder. Kyle Snyder from First American Title. He's not going to be the person that you actually work with at First American. He's going to probably introduce you to one of his closers. So on the selling side is going to send all of those documents to the closing or to the title company, or more importantly, the closer that you're going to be working with. Then the other thing that the selling side is going to be doing is putting together and making sure that they send over all of the disclosures to the buying side. So on the buying side, you're going to be waiting for these disclosures to come. Some agents will send it to you the first day, the first minute that you go under contract. Other agents might send it to you a few days later. The reality with disclosures is that there's really no date and deadline in the contract for them. They just really need to be executed before closing. So I'm at the point where I think it's the best rule of thumb to say, make sure you get it out within the first couple of days. Do not be that listing agent that sends disclosures at the 19th hour, 3 days before closing, when everybody's trying to wrap up their file and everybody's missing signatures on these major documents that we all need for our compliance files. So these disclosures include a source of water addendum, seller's property disclosure, closing instructions, square footage disclosure. And those are about the four very, very, very common ones. All right. Let's talk about them individually. So source of water, pretty self-explanatory. That one is going to go into more of just where the water source comes from. Is it on a well or is it on public water and sewer? How does that work? Square footage disclosure, same thing. It's just going to disclose to you how they came up with the square footage in the MLS. 99% of the time, and what I'm going to educate you guys to do is don't take your time measuring the home and doing all your calculations. Just go into public records and pull that from there. And on the square footage disclosure, it has a checkbox to ask you, where did you get that from? Just say the county assessor's office. It makes it easy. If there's any error, it's not on you. You just happen to, take it from there. So those are the common disclosures. Now, I've received about 3 or 4 calls this week alone around different disclosures from different companies and agents, and our agents not necessarily knowing what they are. And I get it, because right now with COVID, with the way things are in the world, with technology, with everything that's changing, there's a lot more common, or I should say, things that are being presented to parties that used to be few and far in between. And now most companies have what we call an ABA, or an affiliated business arrangement disclosure. That is something that is the party that's sending that to you is disclosing that the entity that they work for is affiliated with a business that basically is there's ownership interest in 2 different entities that have to deal with real estate. So for instance, our office at Keller Williams right now, we are partnering up with Simple Home Loans with Grant Hickman. We have an ownership interest in that entity. And the reason why we have that ownership interest in the entity is because we're going to take the profits or the proceeds from the mortgage company, and we're going to use those for lead generation for our agents. But it's an affiliated business arrangement. And so our office is going to have that disclosure for everyone to sign. So Melissa, you guys just went under contract. We're going to have a form. It might come up before or after you're closed, I'm not sure, but if it comes up before you're closed, we're going to have you and the selling or the selling side sign that. And all it does is disclose to the other side that we are in business with another entity that is involved in real estate. You do not have to use that affiliated business. It's simply a disclosure. So if your buyers or your sellers ever are apprehensive about signing an ABA, just know that it's a disclosure. It's not that you're using those companies, it's that legally they have to disclose to you that they're affiliated with a business that's related to real estate. So that's ABA. RE/MAX has them, the group has it. I believe 8Z has a couple of them. The majority of different brokerages right now are in business with other businesses, so that way they can share in the profits to basically contribute back to the office. It's a great model, and I'm happy to kind of be a part of what's going on with that. So it's brand new to our office, and it's pretty exciting what that's going to be able to do for everybody in productivity coaching. So that's one. Then the second piece that we see quite often is going to be that COVID disclosure, COVID advisory. So we have one in our office, and we only use the one from the state. So it's more of a state one than it is brokered or brokerage related. There are some brokerages that have their own COVID disclosures. There are some brokerages that have their own buyer and seller advisories. So there's different things that are out there. If you have any questions around it, give me a call. But know that for the most part, if it's a disclosure, you're not signing something saying you're going to use that service. You're not signing something saying that you agree to it. You're signing acknowledgement. That's a big thing to understand. You're signing acknowledgement because it's more of a disclosure. All right. So that's what the selling side is going to be doing. And that's why on the buying side, you're reactive. You're waiting for those disclosures to come through. And if you don't see them in the first week, I would email the other side and ask them if they have any due diligence documents and disclosures for their file. A quick rule of thumb for you guys to understand what you're going to be needing is in command. So we have to, hang on a second. Sounds like something's chiming in. Harry's joining us. All right. So in command, we have to go through, we have to upload all of these documents for our compliance files. All right. So we need to do that. The rule of thumb is 7 to 5 days before closing. So what I would do for your checklist is as soon as you go under contract, as soon as you get your first thing sent off, go into your calendar, your phone, set an alarm, put a task in command. However you receive reminders or things to do, go ahead and put that in your calendar. Make sure that 5 to 7 days before closing, you go into command and you start your compliance file. If you want to get paid at the table, that thing needs to be turned in well in advance. So 5 to 7 days is usually when you have all of the documents that you're actually going to need, but there's no reason you can't start to upload things as you go along. Just make sure you're saving yourself some time. Speaking of reminders and calendar invites and alarms, also do yourself a favor and put into your calendar or however you want your reminder system to be, your dates and deadlines. So for a buying side, I always put into my calendar the inspection objection date, the inspection resolution date, the appraisal dates, as well as loan termination. I don't really have a good habit of putting in the earnest money deadline. I just stress that within the first couple of communications with my buyer, and really make sure that on my checklist, they verbally tell me when they're going to turn it in. And then I'll set a reminder maybe in my phone for when they told me they'd turn it in, so that way I can remind them to do so. So make sure that when you're going through here, you're thinking of all your fail safes. You got your checklist going, your reminders are set up. That will set you up for success to get to the actual closing table. Does anybody know the percentage of deals that fall apart? In any given arena, it's 10 to 20%. You don't want to be that 10 to 20%, because a lot of times some of that 10 to 20% is actually not the buyers and sellers. It's because people weren't watching the dates and deadlines and panicked. And instead of adjusting dates and deadlines through an amend extend, some people panic and just terminate the contract because they made a mistake. You never want to be that person. You never really want to go through that. The other reason why some things close is, let's say you do forget a date and deadline and you want to push out that date and deadline through an amend extend. Now you have to have the other party's agreement to do so. If they're not in agreement to do so, the contract's going to fall apart, or you're going to lose your earnest money. So checklists, these dates and deadlines, this is what we get paid to do. I cannot stress that enough. In my buyer's consultation, I literally say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, the rules of real estate have changed over the years. You see, my job used to be the gatekeeper of information, the gatekeeper of all the houses on the market to show you. Now the internet is plentiful. You can see any home that you want. The reason why I get paid what I do is to protect your earnest money and get you from contract to close. So that's why that's so important. You have all these disclosures, these deadlines, these checklists, these fail safes are what I call them. So that way you don't screw up during that. I'm really hitting home on this, and it's not to make you nervous. It's to put your butt in gear. And the first thing that you're going to want to do is create a checklist, create your system. I'm horrible. I'm god awful with my checklist. I will literally put a reminder in my phone, a calendar entry in my calendar, and then I have myself set up in Command under my own profile to send me task alerts for different deadlines. I have to have 3 different ways to tell me that, because on any given day I could be busy enough to not check one or the other. Do whatever it takes to get those done.
Yeah, and I don't know if you mentioned it, Bruce, but so if you get a deal, let's say you have the buyer and everybody signs off. The first thing you ought to do is go into your calendar and put all the dates that you have set up for that sale, so that you don't forget them, and have a 24-hour or a 12-hour, whatever you want to set up, reminder, so that you know you've got 12 hours to make sure that that deadline gets accomplished. Because Bruce is right. You can lose that deal from that, just like that.
It's fast, swift, and it's disheartening for sure.
Yeah, and if you don't have the ability to do an amend extend and have enough hours to get those signed off, guess what? That seller has a right then to get out of the contract, or the buyer, either one.
Bingo. So in setting up your fail safes and doing all of that, especially when you're going through and you're nervous and you're trying to set up a checklist, understand that Command is a pretty cool system, and you can create different checklists and different points in here. I literally created most of my checklists based upon the Ignite class, and I'll show you that document here soon, as well as what we need for compliance in Command. So let me go to my homepage so everybody can see. So if I'm in my homepage and I go over here to pipeline, or I'm sorry, not pipeline, opportunities. And I go to my under contract. So I've got a listing under contract right now. And I click into the opportunity. This is my opportunity. If you click on documents, this is where you're going to start to see what you absolutely need to have uploaded and what you need, what's required of you. So the first step over here is listed. The next one is under contract and close. So each one of these have different checklists. So for listed, you're going to see over here, exclusive right to sell, required. So you're going to run through here and you're going to upload everything that's required. So I run with a transaction coordinator, so it looks like she has already uploaded the seller's property disclosure, square footage disclosure, and closing instructions. So I've got a little checkbox over here for those. And when I run through everything that I have, I'm going to need to upload the exclusive right to sell, the seller's advisory, that one's uploaded, and you just so on and so forth. But your first couple of them, read through here, because there are so many things that you could potentially upload, but the majority of them are for one-off situations. So make sure you pay attention closely to the required fields and read through the other ones. So conditionally required if acceptable or if applicable. Lead-based paint disclosure. This house that I have doesn't have one, so obviously I'm not going to upload one. But read through there and make sure that when you're going through this, you keep on top of this. You keep things uploaded. Under contract, this is where your other things are going to be uploaded. So this is where the contract to buy and sell, earnest money receipt. So for everyone that's in Longmont, I'm not sure if we deal with this in Loveland or Fort Collins, it says earnest money check or promissory note, and then it says earnest money receipt. Well, if you guys know or have dealt with this yet, the earnest money check, a copy of that is on the receipt from the title company. So download the document and upload the exact same document twice in here, if that's the way you have it, okay? So as you can see, I'm not gonna hit this too long here, but that's where you can create some of your checklists, and it's a very easy, user-friendly system. Go back here. So continuing on, all right, we're under contract, we're setting up the inspections, we're turning in earnest money, but we want to make sure this is flawless. We've got to get you from contract to close, and the only way to do that is to really understand that picture. So you set up your inspection, you go through and you negotiate different items. There's a bunch of different things that could happen. They could reject your request. They could basically reply, meaning they're going to counter you back with something that they may have taken out, or they're going to fully accept it. That is in the form of an inspection resolution. Okay, an inspection resolution comes after the inspection objection. During all of this beginning under contract stuff and going through your inspection, the title company is going to be doing their job, and they're going to be making sure that as they transfer the deed or the title from the seller to the buyer, it's going to be free and clear of any liens or encumbrances. Okay, so it's basically underwriting the loan, making sure that there's clear title, making sure that the lender and the title company are working together to make sure that the lender is willing to give that money at the time of closing for that borrower to close. All right. Also during this time, you're going to have your appraisal. You're going to have HOA docs possibly going back and forth. There's a bunch of things that could be into play, but if you need help, call myself, call Harry, call Jesse. We're all here to help you walk through this. All of this stuff takes 30 to 45 days. So we have time, all right? Be careful with your dates and deadlines. So here's another key to success as far as your dates and deadlines goes and how to interact. If you have something done, do not wait until the deadline to send it to the other side. The more that you make that a habit, the more the other side is going to make that a habit. Meaning, if you're on the buy side and you have the inspection done and you know exactly what your buyers want to ask for to fix, repair, replace on inspection, and it's 2 days before your inspection objection, send the inspection objection 2 days before your deadline. Because then the seller can start to get to work on it. And then there's a good possibility they'll send you a resolution before the resolution deadline. The last thing, the absolute worst and last thing that you're going to want to do is have a resolution come over at 8 o'clock at night on the deadline day, and it's not satisfactory to your buyer. It's awful. It's a horrible feeling, because you only have until midnight to make a decision on whether or not you want to move forward with that. And you have very, very little time to rebuttal that back to the selling side. Because I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of selling sides that will send that over to you at 8 o'clock at night. And then guess who doesn't answer their phone if your buyer doesn't like it? The selling side. And there can be a real big pickle in that. I think we should talk about that.
Just because you have a date doesn't mean you, Bruce is spot on that. Just because you have a date that says it's due, let's say October 2nd, but you know on September 30th that you have all the information that you could send for it, you should send it. Right? I mean, that's what Bruce is saying, because he's exactly right. There are agents out there that, because they want to put you in a pickle, right? Here's the resolution, take it or leave it. You only got about 2 hours. And then your buyer's in trouble. Yeah.
Bingo. So Harry, I'm going to use you here. So Harry, let's say that happens. All right. You're a brand new agent. That happens. You just got at 8 o'clock at night. Your buyer doesn't like the resolution, and you can't get a hold of the selling side to see if they're willing to do anything different. What do you do? How do you advise your buyers?
Well,
I can answer this if you want.
No. I want to make sure I heard you right.
Okay.
So it comes out at 8 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
You have two options for your buyer. If you can't get a hold of the seller's agent and you only have 2 hours, which means you couldn't even send an amend extend because it probably wouldn't get signed. In other words,
Right.
change the date.
Yep.
So your buyer has 2 options. One is they can accept the resolutions as they are and sign it and move forward, or they can get out of their deal.
Bingo. There now in this year, there's kind of a, I'm going to call it 2.5 options. 2.5 options. And here's why. So yes, one, you can accept it as is and move on, and you're through inspection. 2, before midnight, you can send over a termination and earnest money release form to actually just have it dead in the water and terminated.
Yeah.
The secondary option, but it still kind of accomplishes the same thing, is letting the deadline pass and falling out of contract. And because you as the buyer sent off the inspection objection, you are compliant. The seller sent the inspection resolution, they are compliant. The contract would terminate automatically at midnight, and your buyer would have the right to receive their earnest money back.
Absolutely.
Be careful, because there's a lot of listing agents that don't feel that way, or don't know that they would assume that your buyer would be in default, and that's not the case. The contract terminated, nobody's in default.
That's right.
Your buyer would have the right to earn their earnest money back. But the reason why I say the half option or 2.5 options is because at midnight it terminates, but it terminated due to the clauses in the contract and not you sending over the termination and earnest money release. As soon as you send over earnest money and termination and earnest money release, the deal's dead in the water. There's no reviving this contract. So this year, as of 2020, we have the opportunity now to let the deadline pass. Technically, we'll be out of contract. And in the morning, we can call and we can start to talk to the other side to see if there's any way that we can save this deal.
Yep.
And that is called a revival contract. So we do have that now, first year ever. I've done it twice this year, and it's quite amazing. And it was this exact situation. I received an inspection objection at like 10:10 at night, or I'm sorry, an inspection resolution at like 10:10 at night. My buyer did not like it. I didn't like it. And I knew this other agent was trying to stronghold us. So we let it pass. We terminated, and I politely sent them an email saying that we're going to send over the earnest money release form, because at that point you don't have to send over a termination because it's dead. The contract is literally done. So I told them we were going to send over an earnest money release form if they weren't going to talk to us, and boom, within a couple of minutes they're talking to us. We used a revival form, and the revival form has to have what you want to resolve. So the revival form almost all automatically puts in the inspection resolution stuff. I know this is going way over everyone's head for Ignite. If you have any questions about the revival form and how to fill it out, reach out to all three of us. We'll help you out.
And just remember, so as Bruce was saying, that seller's agent, why do you want to get a bad taste? Because here's what happens. Pretty soon you're going to say, you're going to have, somebody's going to look at a house, you're going to be looking at a house and you're going to see that agent's name, and you're not going to want to go show your buyer, because dealing with that agent is going to cause problems for your buyer. So you start to limit your inventory, and that seller's agent loses out. So if you are a seller agent that does that, you at some point you're going to have a bad reputation. What's the point of doing that?
Yep.
I mean, I just don't understand why agents get themselves in that. I'll give you an example real quick. I had an agent, and she dealt with non-Pearson in that area. She lied to me and did some funny stuff. I'd never use her. I would never want to deal with her. I'd never want to show one of my clients a property that she had because they wouldn't trust her. So what did she benefit by doing that in the first place, right? Nothing. So you don't want to become that agent. And I just wanted to state that. So by doing something at 10 o'clock at night, what was the point of that?
You cut out, Harry.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. I just don't understand what you benefit by doing that, by sending something to Bruce at 10 o'clock at night, knowing they only have 2 hours. I mean, nobody won there. Your clients didn't win. Now there's problems. I can go on and on. But anyway, you get my point.
Yep. Communication is one of the most important things, right? And Harry's saying don't create the reputation, but he's also saying, look, it could happen to you. So be courteous, be communicative. If it's a mistake, call the other side and let them know it's a mistake. The other thing is that if you're in the power of sending the resolution, you may send the resolution over along with an amend extend, maybe adding another day as a courtesy to the buyer on the other side. The more that you can create this win-win and this culture between the 4 of you, right? The four groups, right? You, the buyer, the seller, and the other agent. That's your group. If the more you can make that a cohesive unit, the better things be the whole time. So get creative. If you made a mistake, tell your sellers, hey, look, I'm sorry, I forgot this deadline was here. We need to send this over to the buyer ASAP. I know it's 10 o'clock at night, but I feel it's right and necessary that we give the buyer an extra day. So go ahead and sign this as well as an amend. Like, if it's your mistake, you got to do what you got to do to be aggressive with your clients to get that thing extended. It's going to save your reputation. People are going to want to work with you. And as you go throughout this career, you will start to realize and understand that the value of creating a relationship with the agent is so huge, so huge, so huge. In fact, I'm going to pick on Melissa Brashers again. This is incredible. And you guys, the way that I educate everyone, the way that you guys are going to be taught is going to help set you apart from others. You're going to close more deals because of this very instance. Melissa, tell everybody what happened.
So my clients were looking at an investment property that was very popular, and I don't know how much detail I can give.
I'll give it.
You'll give it?
Yeah, if you're
Okay.
afraid, I know what you should keep out. You're right.
Okay.
So she has a buyer who wants to make an offer on an investment property. This thing's listed at $155,000. Can you imagine the amount of attraction this place got? So her buyers write an offer, and she in the email, she did a very beautiful job of not giving up her buyer's poker hand, but yet giving enough information to try and tug on the heartstrings of these people. Because the reality is Melissa and I both, we don't know whether this investment opportunity is being sold by an investor or somebody who loved that house for years and just honestly just didn't have the money to keep up with it. And that's a sad thing. There's so many people that love the home that they're in, but don't make enough money to keep up with the deferred maintenance. So we're looking at this property. We don't know whether it's an investment property or it was an investment property or something that somebody loved. And so she just put in there that her buyers were going to go under if they went under contract, they wanted to restore the beauty and the glory of that home. Long story short, Melissa beat out other offers that had exactly what the seller was looking for. And there were two things for us. One was price. And the other thing was we needed to keep our inspection rights in the contract. This seller absolutely wanted her to get rid of her inspection rights as well as move up the closing date. We couldn't do that because it's our buyer's choice and we're going to do whatever we can for the buyer. But Melissa won the offer with the inspection dates still stuck in there, as well as a lower price than the seller was guaranteed to get. Simply because the seller absolutely loved the idea and the fact that her buyers were going to restore the property to its original condition. I mean, that's why she got it. They literally probably took a $5,000 to $10,000 loss just by taking Melissa's offer because she took an extra 10, 15 seconds to type out that her buyers were going to restore the beauty of the home. $5,000 to $10,000 for one little extra effort. It goes a long way and you're going to close more deals. If Darby Stump was on here, same thing happened to her a few months back. She had a buyer down in, I think it was in Colorado Springs or Castle Rock or something. She went under contract $7,000 lower than the highest offer because she made a relationship with that other agent. They talked about how these both parties would meet up and match and get to the closing table. And it was a win-win for both. That's what we got to stress in this Ignite class, guys. It works and it works well and it works more often than anyone ever would think. So again, be that agent people want to work with. So now Melissa got that accepted, but now as Melissa goes and the reputation builds, the next time that Melissa has a listing or a buyer for the other agent's listing or buyer side, Melissa may be more likely to take an offer from that agent's buyer than someone else because she knows it's going to be a good transaction, because she knows that not quote unquote the other agent did her a favor, but that the other agent relayed the proper information. She knows that that's going to be right. So you're going to start to see that. You guys, I hate to say it, but I've got about 5 or 6 agents in and around our area that if I have a listing and they send me an offer, I'm going to tell my sellers how big of a pain it was to work with that person the last time around, no matter how good their offer is. And then let that be up to my buyer or my sellers or my buyers to want to work with them. It's a big thing and it happens. A lot of times rapport is built through this process, under contract negotiations. And that's honestly, it's what this entire Ignite series is all about, right? Getting to that closing table. So any questions about the process or the flow chart, I should say, from the contract to close? No? Okay. So this is where we get into some of these checklists. Section 18 is, page 18 is a checklist for buyers from contract to close. So we just talked about a lot of this, right? Submit contract and earnest money to a title company and escrow. Around here, the selling side will do that, but you need to submit earnest money to the title company. You don't necessarily have to submit the contract. Deliver earnest money to the listing agent. A lot of time, again, that's more of a title company around here. Schedule the inspections. Obtain loan approval in writing. So if you're on a lending side, you need to send your contract to the lender. The lender gets started on that. Going through, repair and negotiate any inspection items. So you guys create checklists, use this, rip off and duplicate, man. I love R&D in this industry. Take any of this and tweak it. Use whatever you need, take out whatever you don't need, okay? Same thing on the selling side. Be a problem solver. All right, So getting from contract to close, you want to think about all sorts of different ways and avenues to get to that closing table. All right. So this is where we're going to talk about the difference between a seller concession and a price reduction. This is where we want to talk about, you know, when a roof needs replaced, is it better to get a credit from the buyer or from the seller and have the buyer replace the roof? Is it better to have the insurance company come out and take a look at it? You want to make sure that as you go through this contract, you are the answer to all problems. We don't get paid for smooth closings. We get paid to get to closing table when there's issues. And there's always issues. I've never, ever, ever, ever in my entire life seen an inspection report clean as a whistle, even on a brand new home. There's always something. There's always something to talk about, negotiate, work around. So let's talk about seller concession and let's talk about price reduction. Okay. So on the selling side of things, it's all about the net. It's all about what they're going to bring home. On the buying side of things, it's all about how much money is going to come out of their pocket and what it's going to do to affect their life. So if we need to have some inspection items repaired on a property and the seller really just doesn't want to pay for it or hire out that person, but they're willing to either one, take money off the purchase price of the home or give the buyer seller concession, what do you think the best thing to do is for the buyer? Anybody can chime in if they want, or I'll just say it.
I think it probably depends on the situation. If they're looking for a lower monthly payment, then taking it off the price of the home might be better. Or if they're looking for more cash up front, then the concession might be better.
Perfect, Melissa. Perfect. It does. It depends, right? So in my mind, I instantly go to seller concession will probably be the best bet. But I have to understand that that's a probable situation, which means anytime there's no definitive answer, the actual response needs to come from your client. So on a buyer's side, the difference between taking a price reduction and a seller concession is simply that a seller concession will allow them to have money to pay for their closing costs and prepaids to the lender. So if their closing costs and prepaids to the lender is $5,000 and the seller is willing to give up $5,000 either through a price reduction or seller concession, if they do a price reduction, then the buyer still has to come up with their $5,000 closing costs. If they do a seller concession, then the $5,000 will pay for the closing cost, which means if the buyer has $20,000 to make the deal happen, $15,000 is for their down payment and $5,000 is for their closing costs. It means that when they get to the closing table, instead of bringing the entire $20,000, they're only going to need to bring the $15,000. Does that make sense? So a seller concession keeps money in the seller or in the buyer's pocket. The reason why we're allowed to do that is because without really saying it in writing, the idea is that since the buyer saved money in their pocket, they're going to use that money in their bank account to then make those repairs. But oddly enough or wildly enough, it's actually up to the buyer whether they're going to do that. I got a seller concession for the age of the roof in one of my properties. I did not turn around and put that money into a new roof. The roof is going to still be good for a few years, I hope. I'm kind of teetering on that edge of whether or not I just need to get it replaced before it starts leaking, or whether I'm going to wait and screw myself if it starts leaking and I have to do an insurance claim somewhere. So the reality is that the buyer does not have to use that money that they saved in their pocket for that renovation. So you're going to see a lot of listings out there that say, with an acceptable offer, seller is willing to provide a $3,000 carpet allowance. It's kind of strange to me that listing agents and people are still calling it allowances. Because in the contract, if they're willing to give a $3,000 carpet allowance, in the contract, there's no section for where to put in a $3,000 carpet allowance. What you would do is you would put in a $3,000 seller concession in section 4. I think it's 4.1 or 4.2. It's right underneath the price and terms. So that's the difference. And that's what you want to make sure you understand, is that to the seller, it means nothing. There's no difference. A $5,000 price reduction or seller concession, they net the absolute same. So there's no difference in the money, but now here's the difference on the selling side. If you keep the price the same and you give the buyer a $5,000 seller concession and the appraisal value comes in less than the purchase price, what happens there? Because the seller's already given up $5K, but now there's an appraisal deficit. Does the buyer have to retract their $5,000 in seller concession and reduce the purchase price? Melissa's saying no. Why?
Because that was written into the contract.
Yeah, bingo, because it's already agreed upon. So when something's already agreed upon, you don't have to retract what's already agreed upon. Now, through negotiation and creating a win-win situation, you're going to ask a lot of probing questions to the selling side, because there's a lot of rights in this situation. The sellers have the right to not sell the property for a penny less than the contract price. Yep. And the buyer has the right to not pay a penny over the appraisal value. Yep. And so 99% of the time we go into negotiation. The seller may ask, well, if I come down in price, would you be willing to give up some of that seller concession for what we negotiated on inspection? On the buying side, you have the right to say, no, that's for the inspection items. Now we are dealing with the appraisal. So it goes into negotiation. I can't tell you exactly how it all works out because it's all different every time. Just know that different pieces of the puzzle and different dates and deadlines are different things. Melissa's right. It doesn't automatically do anything. All right. Any questions around seller concession, price reduction, what that means?
How do you deal with something that's a bigger ticket item than $5,000 or $6,000? Because I know that the lender's very, the seller concession is limited to the amount of the loan.
Perfect. You're just jumping into what I was going to say. All right. So sometimes you have those bigger ticket items. Sometimes you have a $10,000 roof. Here's what you have to know about seller concession. If the seller agrees to a $10,000 seller concession with the buyer and the lender can only use $6,000, what happens is that the price does not automatically drop by $4,000. The buyer is technically SOL. There's a lost $4,000 because the seller cannot just give someone a check for the remainder. It has to be internal. It has to be in the inner working. So Ann is right. She's spot on. If that's the situation, then most of the time in my career, I would ask the lender, what's the max that we can use for seller concession? And then let's do a combination of a price reduction as well as seller concession. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
I have a question about that. So before I was a realtor, I had my house on the market and the buyers wanted a new roof. And so they said, either you replace the roof before closing or bring X amount to closing and we'll replace the roof.
Bring X amount to closing.
Yeah, and like
how did you bring it?
Give us the money for the roof at closing for us.
In the form of like just a check?
I think so.
Yeah, you better not be doing that.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't do that. I replaced it. But hearing this conversation, I'm wondering if maybe I shouldn't have done that even, because I maybe could have.
Well, if your inspector came through and said the roof needed to be replaced, you're probably not going to be able to sell it until you replace that roof, because no matter what inspection came after that, you'd have to disclose it anyway. So you got a bad roof. But Bruce is right. You don't want to give them a check at $10,000 at closing.
You can't do it. The title company will, the lender will stop the closing right there.
Yep.
You cannot transfer funds outside of that contract.
Interesting.
So with all of that being said, so a new roof, a lot of times, you know, the seller will agree to put on a new roof, and maybe not, the new roof can go on before closing. So sometimes what you would do is you would escrow some funds.
That's just where I was going next.
So let's say it's a $10,000 roof. Then the title company more than likely is going to escrow 1.5 times the amount. So if it's a $10,000 roof estimate, they're going to hold back from the seller about $15,000. Then once the roof is complete and done, the invoice from the roofer will go to the title company. The title company will cut the check to the roofer, and any remaining balance or money in escrow will go back to the seller in the form of proceeds. So that can work like that sometimes, but again, it's the lender, or it's the title company facilitating how the cash is going to flow through hands. Let's see here. Oh, the other thing is you have a lot of buyers that will likely want a price reduction if they don't know. So you have to know how to explain things, and you have to know how kind of money works. So a $10,000 price reduction is $10,000 spread out over 30 years, which means, typically speaking, a $10,000 price reduction is only going to save the buyer's monthly payment by about $25 a month. So that's kind of the general rule of thumb. I'll be honest with you, sometimes it saves the buyer, you know, $15 a month. Sometimes it saves the buyer $40 a month. But generally speaking, depending upon where interest rates are, any $10,000 swing is only $25 in their monthly mortgage. So maybe we should have done this more in the buyer's section too. But so for when I'm working with a buyer, and I have a buyer who's stuck, I mean, absolutely stuck on a purchase price of $350. And I know that there's a perfect property out there for $360, and they don't want to look at it because in their mind, they're seeing this wad of cash and this bucket of money of $10,000, because to any one of us, that's a large sum of money. And so when you say that and you hear it, it's our job as an agent to understand that, to tell them and understand what that truly means. And most of the time when I say, hey, for $360, did you know that most likely it's only going to increase your monthly payment by $25 a month? I think what we should do is, if this is the house for you, let's talk to the lender and let's see what this does for you. Because Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, yeah, of course, the price, you know, is a factor in what you're doing, but isn't the main factor in what you're doing to keep your monthly payment around what you can afford? If you can afford $360 and have it just jump up $25 a month, do you think you could maybe not go out for that beer once a week, or go out to Starbucks once a week? That would cover it instantaneously, and you would have no difference in your monthly expenditures. That's how you can get people to kind of understand the rhyme and reason behind seller concession around increasing their price point, maybe going over their budget slightly, type of thing. So any questions around that? Being a problem solver, thinking through everything. As new things come up, think to yourself, if you think that there's only one way to do something, I want my words to ring in your ear. There's more than one way to skin the cat. There's more than one way to do almost everything in real estate. Call me. Let's mastermind around it. You may be right? The thing that you're thinking may be the best option, but you won't know until you kind of go through it with me. So reach out to me and Harry and Jesse. We'll mastermind around that for you guys. We already talked about closing information. Seize the golden opportunity. Transactions are absolutely some of the best things for you to do. It's the best ways for you to infiltrate and grab leads from your leads. The other thing that's it's good to do is it's good to see who those lenders are on the other side. If you have a selling side and the buyer brought a lender to the table and that lender just absolutely killed it, you may want to set up a meeting with that lender. You always want to make sure that the vendor partners that you're working with are always top notch and are always doing the right things for you. I can't stress that enough. The other thing is when you're on the other side of the table with a great agent, it's your job to see if that agent's happy where they're at. It's just such a beautiful thing to be able to have conversations with new people about getting them over to Keller Williams, having a new vendor partner, having a new inspector, having a new lender. Make sure that whatever side you're on, you make time for everyone that's involved in that transaction, because you'll never know who you're going to meet. I can assure you that. Follow up with everyone. So once you get to the closing table, my famous line is, look, guys, congratulations. My job is never done and never over. You're going to hear from me at least 42 times over the next year. And I know that sounds scary, and I know that you're thinking I'm going to call you 42 times. The reality is that you're going to see some marketing from me. You're going to see some mailers from me. I want you to know that I'm here for you, your friends, and your family, as well as your coworkers. If anybody needs help with real estate, let me know. So throughout that contract, I'm asking for business probably 5 different times. And then at the end, I'm setting them up to understand that I'm going to be branding myself to them over every year, year over year over year. Year over year over year. This is interesting here, and this still rings true. I still see it happen. Everybody knows that they should be following up with their past clients, and still nobody does. NAR reports that 88% of clients say they would use a real estate agent again, but only 12 actually do. And it's because people will forget your names. I don't care how much you felt like you were friends with somebody or you got to know that person and their family. The reality is once that transaction's over, they no longer have a need to reach out to you. You are the one that has that need to reach out to them. All right.
Yeah,
and after the go ahead.
Sorry, Bruce.
No, you're good.
I was just going to say mind share is market share. I mean, Gary Keller says that all the time. Mind
Yep.
share is market share. So what Bruce is saying is you need to keep them, even though they might not be buying for 2 or 3 years, you want to continue to remind them that you're the realtor and that you can help them. And I'll give you an example. Recently, one of my very first clients, and I don't have that many because I got right into being a productivity coach, but they just had twins. And so I went and bought a ton of diapers, and because they have twins, and I bought formula because God knows they're going to need formula. And so I went over and brought it, and they didn't even know. They were so blown away. I mean, I was their realtor, and that was, over a year ago. But at the end of the day, they're going to remember that now.
Bingo. Your touch programs, your follow-up programs, right? That's a reminder system for you. All right.
Yep.
You do not need to send the big, burly, grumbly bachelor a new cookie recipe just because your CRM said send them a new cookie recipe, right? Don't do that. Send them how to make beef jerky from home recipe if you're going to do a recipe. Get them a beer wrench is what I call them. Go buy them a bottle opener branded with your name on it. Think through and work your database the way that you see fit. Every single person that's in my database, if I see their name flash, I can tell you within a heartbeat whether or not they're going to be sent whatever I'm sending out that day. Make sure you know your people. And here's another way that you get to know them. So I know Ignite says surveys are great. a lot of people are kind of getting away from these surveys now, and they're setting up in their system a post-closing checklist. So here's what I started doing. I think it works beautifully, and it really helps the engagement, and it really helps you solidify the relationship after close. So what I started doing, instead of starting them up on a 33 or 45 touch program right after they close, I'm going to set them up on a 2-week post-closing checklist for myself. So one of the first thing that sends out is, hey, it was awesome to work with you guys. I know I got to know a little bit more about you, but there are still some things that I don't know. And so instead of sending them a survey, what I will send them is more of a, I don't even know what I call it. It's like a favorites list, right? What is your favorite candy bar? Do you have dogs or cats, and what are their names? What's your favorite restaurant around town? What do you guys like to do? What are your hobbies? I want to know anything I can know about them that we may or may not have talked about. Because when somebody says, hey, my favorite candy bar is a Kit Kat, and you don't see them, they don't answer the phone, they don't really respond to any of your stuff for another year, and finally you get them on the phone and you say, hey, let's go out for coffee, let's go out for lunch, let's go out for a beer, and you show up with a Kit Kat bar, I'm telling you, you go so far, it doesn't even, it's so unreal, it's uncanny. You guys, it works for me too. I stole this from a lender. So a lender wrote down and had me fill out this stuff as soon as we did our first deal together. And my favorite food in the entire world is salmon. I love salmon. I could eat it. I could eat it raw. I could eat it cooked, smoked, grilled. It doesn't matter. I love that stuff. I went out for coffee with them, like I'm talking years after I filled out this form. And they brought me a package of honey smoked from the Honey Smoked Salmon Company, a little packet of honey smoked salmon. That still sticks with me to this day. It's unreal what that'll do. So anyways, that's kind of what I started doing. Post-closing checklist. I send out more of like a get to know you type of form or favorites form. And then what I do is at the bottom of that form, I want them to include a review. Now, if you guys know anything about, Google and Facebook and all of that, a written review is great on paper, but you can't go in and review yourself with their words for them. So it's hard, and you need to make sure that you're getting reviews and testimonials from people. Like I said, written is fine because you can post it on your website, you can use it in your marketing material and all of that, but you want these people to go on Facebook and review you. You want these people to go on Google and review you. So over the next 2 weeks, I'm kind of giving them subtle reminder that, one, they're still unpacking and real estate is still top of mind and that I need referrals. 2, I would love to know how our experience went. And instead of doing a survey for me, I want you to fill out, and I want you to go into Google, and I want you to review me. So make sure your follow-up campaigns have links to your Google review page. So if you look yourself up as a real estate agent on Google, you're going to be able to kind of go in there, and where it says write a review, click that button, copy and paste that link to them, so that way they can review you. Same thing with Facebook. Send them your Facebook user account or your business page, so that way they can review you. So for about 2 weeks, that's kind of my follow-up. How's the moving going? Is some of them. Some of them I say, give me a review. And the first one, I want to know more about them, and I want to know their favorites. Some people also use that form for getting their birthdays and anniversaries. I get that stuff at the closing table, but you guys can tailor it to however you want. But it's very, very important that you have a post-closing checklist. It's very important. It's exactly what you're going to use to keep in touch with someone. Okay. It also gives you talking points for those people that are very boring, the people that don't talk a lot. If they fill out that that's what I call it, all about me form. If they fill out the all about me form and they give me their hobbies and what they like to do, but throughout the entire transaction, I couldn't pull any of that out of them, Now, when I make my phone calls and I ask for referrals throughout the year and I'm touching base with my database, I've got something to go off of. I've got a talking point to try and create a conversation. Cool. What else do we have here? Oh yeah, this is definitely part of my closing checklist. Sending them a handwritten thank you card. I stopped sending people movie tickets, gift baskets, and all of that stuff. The only thing that I send to people that I close with, I don't send it, I bring it to the day, I bring it there the day of closing. And it's more of a closing gift, and it's always branded with me or my name or my company. The reason why it's branded is because when you have a branded closing gift, it's 100% tax write-off. If you have a closing gift that's not branded to you, it's a 50% write-off. So I stopped doing movie tickets and gift baskets and things of that nature unless I could brand it to myself. Just simply because it's a better tax write-off that way. The other thing is that if you're consistent and you do the same closing gift and you brand it to yourself, not only do you get the tax write-off, but it's going to be hard for the IRS to catch you, quote unquote, giving gifts for referrals, giving gifts just because they made you money. So it's illegal, you guys. If somebody sends you a referral and that referral closes and you want to take that person out to dinner or send them a Starbucks gift card, you cannot do that. You are actually referring what they call a service or a good of value, and it's illegal. You can only do that from agent to agent. So if Melissa refers me business, she can ask me to pay a 25% referral, and I can take her out to eat to say thank you. You are not supposed to be doing that with your clients, okay? Any questions on tokens of appreciation, how to get around that and make sure that you're compliant, closing gift-wise, checklist? All right, getting paid. We got to talk about this. So at Keller Williams, we have the luxury of getting paid at the closing table. All right, so done right and done within our internal workings, if you do everything you have before closing, which is why I say set a reminder 5 to 7 days before closing, you will get paid at the closing table. So when you're capping and you're paying out your royalty, if you do this, the office will issue what's called a DA or a CDA. So some title companies call it a CDA, our market centers call it a DA. It's all the same thing. It's a disbursement authorization or a commission disbursement authorization. And what that means is that it's giving the title company authorization to cut the check not only to the office, but you as well. And then once you pay your royalty and your cap at the office, doing the DA allows the title company to cut just the entire check just to you. So that's very important that you fill out all your compliance work in your green sheet through command. And that's what we were looking at over here. Once you have all of this stuff uploaded that's required, you're going to hit this submit button, submit to MC. I'm not going to do it right now because I don't have everything uploaded. Over here, I have the option because I have 3 of these documents in here. If you don't have anything uploaded, it just takes away the option for you. But do not submit this to the MC or the market center until you have everything in here fully done. Do not take it there. You're wasting a lot of the staff's time because all they're going to do is go through here, review your docs, review your deal, and then they're going to send you an email with everything that you're missing. The more that you can stop that back and forth, the better off you'll be, the more good grace you'll be with the front end people. All right. If you consistently submit files that are missing different things, you're going to be on the bottom of the totem pole the next time that you want to close a deal. You're going to be at the bottom of the pile for basically filing and getting that DA out to the title company. All right. What else? So any questions on, I guess the other thing you have to do. So once you get through the listed stuff and send it to the MC, under contract stuff and send it to the MC, that's what you need to do for closing, for the DA, okay? Once you're done with the closing, then you can go down here to the close tab. And this is where you're going to upload the DA that was issued by the office. This is where you're going to upload the closing packet. So at the closing table, the title company is going to ask you how you want your closing docs. Make sure that if you're a paper person, ask for it in both manners, electronic as well as paper. So that way you can take the email that they send you, download the PDF, and upload it right to this closing packet. Then if you're a paper person for your own files, you have a paper packet there that you don't have to print out. And vice versa, obviously. If you only get paper, you have to go to the scanner, upload all of that, then upload it here. So just ask the title company to give you both. Then the other thing that you're going to need to upload is the sold MLS sheet. So once you guys close and it's your listing, you need to go into the MLS and mark that thing as sold. So it's a requirement, because if you don't mark that as sold within 3 business days of closing, then you're breaking the MLS law and they can fine you money. So that's why those 3 main things are in there. So upload those and then hit submit to MC. You do that after closing. So to get your DA, you just do listed and under contract. Then once you get back from closing, you have everything done, all 3 of these things, upload it, and then boom, your file's complete. So once you send off your listed and under contract stuff to the MC, then you're going to go over here to the commissions tab. I can't click on this yet. Yeah, let me make sure here. I can't click on this yet for you guys because I don't have my under contract submitted. But once you have this and this submitted to the market center or the office, you're going to go over here to commissions. And this is where you're going to break down how everything is going to be handled and getting paid. So this is where you fill out, I'm collecting X%, blah, blah, blah. And it spits out how everything's going to break down and what you owe the office and what you're going to make. Then that's how the office that's what the office uses then to create your DA on file. They'll verify that your math is correct, things of that nature. Questions, comments, concerns about command and just finishing up the file after closing, and as well as before closing. Cool. You guys, that's pretty well it. All right. We are down to the nitty gritty. We are down. That's really the end of Ignite. Now, I say that, and I need you guys to come to the actual last session, but that's what Ignite takes you through, right? From the beginning to the end. This is a slower section. This is a less timely section. So I've got about 10 more minutes. What kind of questions do you guys have? Is there anything that I missed? Is there anything that you want to go over that I may have not spoke around? Especially you girls that have 2 things, or you guys both got something under contract. Do you feel confident now in what you're going to do moving forward today? Okay, so Melissa, I'm going to ask you this, not to try and get out of our meeting at 3. Do you still feel like we should have our meeting at 3?
I don't think so. My only question was if there's title stuff that I was responsible for. But it sounds like that's on the selling side.
Perfect. So that's a good question. So when you're on the buy side and the selling side is sending those documents and those contracts to the title company, once the title company receives the contracts and the earnest money, they will start to work on what they call their preliminary title commitment. a preliminary title commitment. Let me see if I can find an old one here. Here we go. All right. So here, yes, here it is. Here is the preliminary title commitment. So this is what you're going to receive from the title company. Obviously, it could be in a little bit of a different format than what First American's doing if you're using something different. Here's what I want to stress. First and foremost, before you get lost in this, before you freak out because what you read does not make sense. I mean, this document, it takes you forever to understand. Here's what you need to know. It's not in the scope of your license. You do not need to know how to interpret this or understand this in any fashion, shape, or form. Your job is to just ensure that your buyers or sellers know what to do with this. So on the buying side, what you do is you're going to go through on the buying side and you're going to let your buyer know that this is the preliminary title commitment. This is what the title company is using to transfer the title from the seller's name into their name. And that if they go through this and they have any questions, at the very bottom of this thing, I shouldn't say always the bottom, there will be, hang tight, what the heck? I'm looking for what's called a title examiner or the title preparer. So, wow. I'm recording this and I'm completely off. Okay, here we go. Sorry. Everywhere on here, everywhere on a title commitment, you're going to see that their inquiry should be directed to, okay? It's so important. I love what it says about that because your buyers expect you to know this. And this is something that I will not teach you because it's out of the scope of your license. And as soon as you think you know what it says and you interpret it wrong, O&E will not cover you. This is not in the scope of your license. This is not for you to interpret. And I can't stress that enough. If you start to try to and something goes awry, your sellers or your buyers can sue you. Because if they start to go after the title company is going to go, where'd you hear that from? Because that's not it. And we have no record of you calling in and asking us anything. So make sure you direct your buyers to call the number and the information that's provided if they have any questions. Here's the other thing. It's not just for inquiries or questions. The title company is required that if somebody calls in and says, explain this to me, they go through this with your buyer. They'll go through this with you too. They just don't like to unless your buyer's on the phone because they don't want to waste their time. So if your buyer ever wants to call in, set up a three-way call. It's very interesting to see what all is in here, how scary it looks, and how much you can't interpret it or read it, but yet they can explain it in such a fashion that makes total sense. I'll give you guys just a very, very small and brief little overview. Hey, hang on one second. Let me. Okay, so make sure, I would encourage you to have a buyer do that, especially the analytical buyers. If you guys know anything about the DISC profile, those high C buyers are going to have questions and they're going to want to know about it. So direct them to there. One of the things that I will show you on here are what we're going to call requirements. All right. This is something I have trained myself to just briefly glance at. This is going to say where and what is owed on the property. It's a requirement. So it's a requirement to pay off. This is where you're going to see any back taxes owed to the IRS. This is where you're going to see what they owe on the property. So my clients owe this on their property. as of when we went under contract. Now, as we go through this number, you may see this number change ever so slightly, because what happens when you go under contract first is it's kind of a more of a guess of what the loan payoff is, because there's a payoff authorization form that your sellers need to sign that goes through the channels of title that allows title to reach out to the lending institution and pull the actual final settlement number for the day of closing. But what I'm getting at in here is when you see big numbers, when you see different things, that's when I start to say, hey, buyer, I see something in this title commitment. I don't know how to interpret it, but I strongly recommend that we start to talk to the title company because it looks like X, Y, and Z. So here, I'll give you guys my example. About 4 years ago, I was selling a house I wasn't selling it. I was helping a buyer buy this house for $315,000. And on this title commitment, I don't know where it was, but it was in the requirements. It said that there was a $1.2 million IRS back tax due on the property. On a $315,000 house, there was a $1.2 million tax lien on the property. So I called the title company. Title company said, wow, maybe you should call the listing agent. Listing agent said, hey, yes, we're working with the IRS right now. They're working on settling with this. They just wanted to make sure that the home was under contract and they knew what the seller was going to basically pull for the property. And so we had to get basically an IRS, I think it was like an affidavit that said the IRS is not going to be, it was like a surety saying the IRS is not going to keep this tax lien on the property, and that they recognize that it follows the seller. And so at closing, this is that closing that I think I've mentioned to a couple of you guys. At closing, legitimately, there's this guy, looks like he came out of Men in Black. He's black suit, black sunglasses, white shirt, black tie. I mean, to the nine, black briefcase, comes into the title company, sits down at the closing table, and he didn't say a word. Like, there wasn't one word out of his mouth. He sat there, waited for everything to be executed, grabbed his check, put it in his briefcase, locked it, and left. It was strange. Anyways, check there. This is about the only thing that I really look at. But again, you guys cannot interpret that. Once you get better at it and you start to see these things, you're going to start to see that most requirements, these are all pretty much the same. Final affidavit and agreement executed by owners or purchasers must be provided to the company. Contract. Evidence of all assessments for common expenses, if any, have been paid. You guys, the requirements are easy. Don't interpret it, but you guys can start to understand it slowly. Any questions before we end?
I have one more question. For this offer that, or this contract that I have in particular, we took out the insurance deadline. So when should I advise my clients to contact their insurance company? Was that after closing or before closing to give them a heads up, or?
Their insurance company, that's number 4 on your checklist. So you want to talk to insurance companies like after you set up your inspection.
Okay.
If you're not setting up an inspection, call insurance companies now. So insurance quotes are just quotes. You can't hold insurance on something that's not yours.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just quotes for insurance companies. And then if you're working with a lender, those quotes would go to the lender. If it's a cash purchase, you're just basically let the deadline pass. There's no objection or termination. It's just a deadline to do it. If you can't do it by that deadline, you can terminate due to it. You can also terminate due to too high of an insurance quote. Or I shouldn't say too high, something that's not acceptable. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then if you're cash, it's a little different because it's when you're cash, the lender's not mandating insurance on the property. But it's up to you to have insurance on your property, because from day one, if you close on that property and you don't have insurance set in place to take place that day and the house burns down, you're not covered. So when you're cash, it's a little bit more of the agent's job to make sure that the seller, the buyers are doing that. But again, just call for insurance quotes. The insurance companies are really, really good. Most good insurance brokers will go, yeah, when are you closing? I'll make sure we get that in effect come that day. Let me know if anything else happens.
Okay.
Cool. Anything else, guys? Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Stick around. One more Ignite class. It's pretty much just the end. We'll recap some different things, and it won't be very long. All right?
Cool. Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bruce.